Hello and welcome to episode number 161, where I speak with Ayurvedic author and cooking teacher Susan Weis-Bohlen about food and mood and how our food choices affect our emotions and our mental gunas of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So please stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. I will also discuss topics like yoga, which is the sister science of Ayurveda, health and wellness, nutrition, fitness, and mindfulness practices, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to help you to connect to each other. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend that you start by listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. Now, if you like the content, please subscribe to the show so the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at the Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Hello and welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today I'm very happy to welcome Susan Weis-Bohlen, who is an author and Ayurvedic consultant. Pre-COVID, Susan was also an Ayurvedic cooking teacher, meditation teacher, and leader of sacred site tours, mostly to India. In 2008, Susan received her first certification in Ayurveda from the Chopra Center in California. In subsequent years, she studied with Dr. Vasant Lad in New Mexico and India. In addition, Susan is certified in Ayurvedic cooking from Amadea Morningstar. She is now a full-time Ayurvedic consultant, meditation teacher, Ayurvedic cooking teacher, and speaker. In 2018, her first book came out, Ayurveda Beginner's Guide, Essential Ayurvedic Principles and Practices to Balance and Heal Naturally. It has sold over 30,000 copies and is available in 5 languages. Her next book is Seasonal Self-Care Rituals, Eat, Breathe, Move, and Sleep Better According to Your Dosha, will be released by Simon & Schuster in December 2020. Susan lives with her husband Larry and their 3 dogs, Ella, Shadow, and Junie, a rescue dog from India, in the woods in Reisterstown, Maryland, just outside Baltimore City. Susan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm thinking my dogs might make an appearance. We'll
lovely.
See. The recycle truck should be coming soon, and they love to say hello. So we'll see what happens.
Oh, well, that's perfectly fine. Life goes on. We're not too strict on this podcast.
Right. But thank you, Colette. I'm thrilled to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And, I came across your work with your book, but also you did a panel discussion at the NAMA 2020 conference, and the topic of that discussion was foods that nourish the mind. And so I'm looking forward to delving deep into that topic today, Susan. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about your personal journey with Ayurveda and how Ayurveda came into your life.
Sure. Yeah. It seems so long ago now, way back in 2007. I was in my mid-40s, I guess, and I owned a bookstore at the time. And it was a wonderful bookstore, a new age bookshop called Breathe Books in Baltimore. But I was feeling very much burnt out. I opened and ran the store on my own, and it was a beautiful space, but I felt like everybody just needed stuff from me, and I was just depleted. And I had a little Ayurvedic section, and I knew the teensiest, tiniest little bit about Ayurveda. And I knew the word Panchakarma. Mm-hmm. And Panchakarma means literally 5 actions, which I did not know at the time. But I actually thought it was a place in India where you went to get treatments, but it's, I was like, oh, I want to go to Panchakarma. I didn't realize it's not
Panchakarma
exactly
land.
right, which India kind of is.
Yeah.
But so I learned that Panchakarma was a system of different methods that are used on your body to remove toxins from the system and to rejuvenate you at the end. So you sort of go through this phase of letting go of toxic residue, which can be very tiring and depleting, but then you get built up again and you become strong and ready to face the world. And that sounded really good to me. And so I looked into things in the US and I found the Chopra Center in Carlsbad, California. It's no longer there, unfortunately. They closed last year or so. But so I went there. I just, I called and they said, come. And I went and got some help in the store. I did a 10-day program there called Journey and, or Perfect Health. Sorry, the program was called Perfect Health. And it included having these Panchakarma treatments, which are like oil massages. They even use things like sound baths, like using crystal singing bowls and different types of herbs rubbed on the body, powders and so on, and internal enemas, something called basti enemas, oil enemas, and herbalized enemas to help loosen up the gunk that's stuck in you and to help you release that. And then they also had a class, so that was great. So I learned about what I was doing, and there was daily meditation and yoga, and I really learned about what the body was going through, and I totally fell in love with this modality. I just thought this is the piece that's been missing my whole life. I had always carried extra, and well, it's funny, you look back on photos of yourself when you were like 15, 17, and like I thought I was like a beast, right? Not that matters, but I was like really beautiful, and like you don't know it. I'm 57 now, but you look at yourself and you just don't know. So anybody listening out there who's young, just love yourself now. Right. Don't make yourself go through all that. But anyway, I did gain weight over the years. And when I went to the Chopra Center, I did weigh about 220 some pounds. And so the actions of the Panchakarma and learning about Ayurveda clicked something in my head. I had been a meditator and doing yoga for years, and I became vegetarian when I was 16. But I call myself, back then I was a pea vegetarian, pasta, peanut butter, and pizza. That was with some ice cream and cookies thrown in, but I was not like the world's greatest vegetarian. And Ayurveda seemed to give this map for how to do it for the type of constitution I was, which was having a Kaphic imbalance at the time. And so I left there feeling like so clean and like a clean slate. I felt like so much had been removed mentally and physically from my body during this process. I was so excited to fill it up with Ayurveda and Ayurvedic food, khichdi, and learning how to make all these things. And so I just sort of really embarked on that journey, and I pretty rapidly lost quite a bit of weight. I lost about 50 pounds and I lost 80 points of my cholesterol. And that has, pretty much stayed off except for the 10 COVID pounds that are, 10 pounds seem to come back every winter, but that's kind of like what happens, but you get rid of them again in the spring. And Ayurveda teaches you how to do that. So I don't get distressed. I know what to do. But so it felt like I was coming back to something that I had known in the past. It felt like I was remembering. The language of Sanskrit just rang in my head so beautifully. And I began to study seriously with the Chopra Center and then with many other teachers in the U.S. and abroad. And in 2008, I became certified and started practicing. A little bit over a year later, I began practicing as a consultant. And I eventually closed my bookstore after 10 years and became a full-time practitioner. And Amadea Morningstar is a huge mentor to me. She's an Ayurvedic cooking teacher and polarity yoga teacher in New Mexico. I started taking classes with her in early 2008. And I just fell in love with her. And then we have ended up over the years teaching together, doing retreats together. And So she's been a huge influence on my life and my Ayurvedic life. And it just feels natural that I've gone into writing books and doing obviously less teaching now because of COVID, but it just, Ayurveda teaches you how to flow with the different seasons of your life, along with the different seasons outside of us. And I feel like there's a framework, so you never really feel alone once you begin practicing Ayurveda. There's always a home for you somewhere within it.
Yeah, it certainly is, as we say, the manual to life. It gives us so many great guidelines in our lives, and it gives us the confidence to, go through times of change or tough times, especially like we're experiencing at the moment, and gives us, foundations in which we can really focus on and try keep our body and mind in a calm place, which is what we're going to discuss today, which I'm really excited about. And as I mentioned, I came across your work with your book, but also at that NAMA conference earlier this year with the panel discussion on foods that nourish the mind. And we've talked, a lot on the podcast here, Susan, about the mental qualities of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And I'd like for us to start this discussion with how does the food we eat affect these mental qualities?
Sure. This is when I was thinking about talking to you about this today, I was remembering that it was Amadea that brought this to my knowledge. She writes in her first book, the Ayurveda Cookbook, she has a small section on food and mood and what the different tastes, sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent, how they also correlate to our emotions. And I started to get much more deeply into it. And I asked her if I could write about it. And she said, go for it.
Oh, great.
So I sort of took my premise from her, and I really don't know where she took it from, because in my Ayurvedic studies, I have not really read the Charaka Samhita from beginning to end, or the Hridayam. There's so many different ways that we study Ayurveda in America and in the West, I guess, also in Europe, that maybe we don't study the ancient texts probably like we should. But I feel and that this must be in there somewhere. But I really have taken mine from Amadea and just gone with that. But I saw that it was so true. Like I would see clients come in, okay, let's say they have a really bad Vata situation going on, like complete Vata derangement. They're very skinny. Their skin is very dry, very wrinkly. They look kind of prune-like or raisin-like. Their mouth is tight, and it's hard for them to smile. And they kind of even clench. They said, if your people could see, it's like you kind of like sit over clench with your shoulders up and your arms in front of you, and you're like bent over. And that is, in my mind, that's the bitter, sour, kind of astringent, not really sour, sorry, pungent kind of thing that depletes Vata so much. They become, they have this sort of like anger that they hold on to, or resentment. And I'll go through all the tastes, but so sometimes, like if I saw that in a client, I knew that they were really avoiding eating more of the sweet, sour, and salty foods, which would replenish them and rejuvenate and heal their tissues, and concentrating on those depleting, compacting, detoxifying foods of bitter, pungent, and astringent, which really dry them out. And Vata should not be drying themselves out. Like they'll eat like a lot of raw salads and raw vegetables and crunchy things like crackers and pretzels. And that just increases that body type as well as that emotion. And so I saw with these people, if I started, talking to them about that, I found like sometimes they actually craved sweet, but they deprived themselves of it because they didn't feel they were deserving of it. They weren't deserving of love or a hug or even giving love. And so there was a way sort of introducing it slowly, like maybe through certain foods. Sometimes often people are vegan or vegetarian when it really doesn't suit them. So maybe even introducing something like bone broth or something into their diet that can easily be digested and will nourish them quickly. it like feeds their brain, and they're like, oh, I don't need to hold on to that resentment. I can begin to let go because they're nourishing themselves. So that is really watching people heal through these little tiny baby steps with food that I really got into this connection with the emotions. So in Ayurveda, as you know, we have the 6 categories of food I mentioned: sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. And each taste corresponds to a dosha more or less, and they can create balance or imbalance. But we want to make sure that we get all 6 tastes in every meal, but at different amounts. Right. And we'll talk about that. So when you get all 6 tastes in your meal, you feel much more satisfied. I know in the Western diet, what do we eat? What is the Western diet? It's like sweet, sour, salty, right? Yeah. That is what everybody eats. And that is what people are, we have such obesity problems, colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, but also I think really unhappy people. I think they're missing out on the foods that help to clear their mind and create a fulfilled person with a range of emotions. When you're just eating, one small category of food, that is like having like French fries and a burger and a milkshake every single day. And you don't vary your diet at all. So the gut microbiome is starved for good bacteria, and the person can't think straight. I honestly think we have such a divided country in the US right now. We saw so starkly in our elections, right? Yeah. That we had 75 million vote for Biden and 70 million vote for Trump. I want to look at their diets.
Right, right.
I really want to know what they're eating, because I think there's something to that.
Yeah, and how their diets are affecting their mental qualities.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm not going to say who's eating more sweet, sour, and salty, but anyway, we'll just,
food for thought.
Absolutely. So when we only eat from 1 or 2 or 3 categories, our bodies and our minds have a lot of trouble repairing and healing themselves. We know that we have doshic times of day as well as seasons and our bodies and so on. The doshic time of night from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is a crucial pitta time of night, when the body separates nutrients from waste and gets the waste ready for elimination, and you assimilate the nutrients, and like you feed your brain and you feed your tissues, and you rejuvenate and renew and clean the blood at that time of overnight. And if we have deprived our body of all the different types of nutrients out there in nature, then our tissues are starving and our brain is starving. So that is really why we want to have a wide variety of foods in our diet and vary the diet. So it's interesting because the word rasa in Sanskrit, it means a lot of things, but rasa, it means one meaning is taste and another is emotion. So there's no such thing as non-emotional eating. It's all tied together in mind and body. Yeah. And so when we break it down, you want me to break it down for you a little bit?
Please, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So sweet foods are the most satisfying of all the tastes. I think we know that. They say you taste sweet on the tip of your tongue. And this is said in the Ayurveda text that the first taste we have is mother's milk, and that's sweet. And that's on the tip of our tongue. And that is why we seem to really crave sweet more than any other taste, because it was our first taste, and it creates feelings of deep emotional ties, love, compassion, satisfaction, a sense that we're being cared for when we have that taste on our tongue. So we can have those wonderful emotional feelings, but when we take sweet in excess, too much sweetness can promote inertia, dullness, and neediness. So it's like, notice how you feel when you just take a bite or two of something sweet, and then how you feel when you eat the whole box of cookies. It's like two different feelings. Like a little bit on the tongue can make you happy and you feel joy. But then when you go into the whole thing, you tend to feel guilty that you ate it, and then you feel sick and dull and so on. So
Right. So
When
that would be then correlate with the gunas, like a little bit would be more sattvic. And then I guess if it's in excess, the sweet taste could create more of a tamasic mindset, right?
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Very
But you
good.
know what? Sometimes we need something to calm down rajas, let's
Yes.
say.
Yes.
And so feeding yourself a little bit more something that's going to make you feel tamasic could be wise.
Mm-hmm.
I think tamas gets a bad rap.
Right. No, you're very right. Like we all need a little bit of tamas in order to calm down or even to go asleep, right? We need
Yeah.
that dulling energy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
there's a
agree.
balance within there. I feel like in Ayurveda, we look at the gunas and everybody says, "Oh, I want to be sattvic."
Right.
But then, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. But too much sattva it makes you like so ethereal that you're just like totally out of touch, and you start to feed off your own sattvic qualities, right?
Right.
You start to like
Exactly.
wear the white robes and all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so we really want to have a nice balance. And Amadea, she has this beautiful line that. Tamas has the wisdom to let us know when to stop.
Mm.
And I love that. I think about that all the time. Like sometimes you have to do something tamasic to stop yourself, to
Yeah.
step back and
Yeah.
just rest.
Yeah.
But when you overdo it, it's a little bit of a problem. You become a real couch potato at that point.
Right.
Um, then we have these emotional qualities. So when you do crave something sweet, stop and ask yourself, what is it that I'm lacking? Is it truly I need some sweet food, or do I need a hug?
Mm.
Am I not allowing myself to be loved? Am I loving people around me? I talk to people about maybe if, getting a dog or a cat, if they don't have one to feel that love and express themselves, or just volunteering at a dog shelter, helping somebody out, like those random acts of kindness and so
Mm.
on. So all of those actions can lessen the physical craving for something sweet.
Mm.
But look at it, because it might be that you need to like step back and be really mindful. Like, why am I craving this? And it could also be like alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I craving this right now? Is it because I'm lacking something emotionally, or is it physical? And then making a decision what you're going to do. It's any decision you make. It's just so much better to do it mindfully. Even if you decide to eat the bowl of ice cream, just do it mindfully
Right.
and know why you're doing it.
Right.
So sweet foods, in case any people don't know, they're the densely nutritive tastes. They include like proteins, carbohydrates, fats, grains, dairies, bread, pasta, starchy vegetables, sweet fruits and nuts, sugar, of course, honey, and all animal products, meat, sugar, and fish are included in that sweet category. So it's not just what we think it is.
Exactly.
It's, so we want to be aware of what sweet means to us.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Very good.
So Vata and Pitta both benefit from sweet because they need more of that grounding and sweetness. But Kapha, who is so totally sweet, made up of the earth and water elements, they can take sweet in moderation, or even, avoid it completely. When I lost all my weight, I literally stopped eating dairy, wheat, and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recommend people do that, but it worked for me.
Right.
And then I slowly added things back into my diet. But now we're in winter, and I see, eating all this bread that we're eating why do we eat bread during COVID, during times of like stress, that I really have to back off the bread, because that's my sweet category. That's a little bit
Yeah, I guess it can
much.
be very comforting when you have some butter on it too, and it's that, maybe it's goes back to childhood as well. So it's
Well,
a
that
very
Irish
comforting.
butter, like I would
Oh
come to
yeah.
your house just to have a good Irish butter
The good.
and to sit with you, but I really would do that.
Yeah, it's good butter, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then sour foods. So the next category is the sour foods.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we eat them in moderation, they stimulate appetite and digestion. They're great for that. They feel warm and refreshing. But when we take too much of the sour food, it can feel heavy and hot. And it brings up the emotions of being like pessimistic, negative, and irritable.
Mm.
So when a person craves sour food, we want to look at how are they viewing the world? Is the world against them? Are you blaming others? Do you there's all these there are all these terms that use the words like sour grapes,
Right, exactly.
these words are actually in these emotional things. So
Yeah.
sour grapes when things don't go your way. So we want to step back and assess the situation, and that can help a sour person gain perspective. So cooling off and drying out by eating a bit of sour foods, because it is drying and cooling. It can help you take a fresh look at the world and the people around you, and it can really help to balance the emotions connected with sour. So sour includes foods that are like acidic and sparkly, citrus fruits, sour fruits, tomatoes, yogurt, cheese, pickles, most vinegars, and some alcohol. I found that during the COVID experience beginning here in March, and then our elections in the States, everything, and, the response that our government had to COVID, not to be political, but everything was like extremely upsetting. And I was going to sleep almost every night with such intense acid reflux I never had before.
Wow.
And I never had it before. And I have to tell you, since the election, it has dissipated almost completely.
Yeah, I think, having the realization of how much our emotions have
absolutely
a massive effect on our doshas and our gunas.
Yeah. And so when I realized that I was feeling like I had this sour stomach, because I was like feeling like the whole world was against us, and like I couldn't figure out how to fix it. And every night it was just coming up, this acid, because I wasn't able to express the emotion. And I'll tell you, sometimes you're too overwhelmed to even figure it out. Yeah. But then I did. And I did start to treat myself with food, like having a little tiny bit of apple cider vinegar in the morning to sort of alkaline the system. And that has really made a huge difference. So you can look and see, like, it was an emotion that was driving that. Yeah. But then I needed some food to fix it. And that's really what happened.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point for people to understand. That's why we're talking about this today. And I felt it myself. I'm, more like Pitta Kapha constitution, but I felt it myself, that being very aware, of my food choices, but the emotion of just being, we're in lockdown, week 4 of 6 in lockdown here in Ireland. And, I can feel it. So, I had to go out this week and buy some aloe vera, to calm the pitta, and coconut water, and really be mindful of pitta pacifying breath work and everything. So yeah, it can really have an effect. Even though I'm doing my mindfulness every day, it's still just that emotion for all of us right now.
Absolutely.
It's challenging.
We just have to remember to go back to the basics when this happens. But sometimes when you're in it, it is so hard.
And like you said a moment ago, it's even hard to decipher until your body gives you a real signal, because it's like underlying.
And that's why we need pungent, bitter, and astringent foods.
Yes, exactly.
See clearly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So getting back to the sour, I wanted to ask you about the gunas. And the emotions, the effect on the emotions. So the gunas with sour, is that like rajas and tamas?
Yeah, I would think it's mostly rajas, because it has the elements. Well, you're right. It would be rajas and tamas because it has the elements of earth and fire in the sour. And so, so it can like a little bit of sour can ignite your rajas to get you moving. But you just want to be careful not to overdo it, like everything else. Right. So, because it can really backfire. Yes. You can light your fire, and then it can backfire on you. So I would definitely say that. But people who have a lot of rajas, or they want more, which is often a problem. They want to, it's interesting. Dr. Ladd talks about the difference between pleasure and joy. And rajas seeks pleasure, which they have to replenish constantly. Just let's say gambling gives you like this pleasure to go out there and gamble and make money and or lose money, and this the excitement. Like you gain the pleasure by doing the actual act. Whereas joy just sort of unfolds in front of you. You don't need to do anything to experience joy. It just is, like a sunrise or a sunset, or looking at a face of somebody you love. There's no action involved in it. It's just your presence. Whereas pleasure requires action. And so, it's this beautiful thing that Dr. Ladd can go off on. It's just like, when I heard him teach this, I was like, I was like agog. I was just like, this is so amazing. And so Rajas just seeks pleasure constantly. They're seeking it. They want more and more and more. Whereas I think, if you're really in a sattvic mind, you're just experiencing joy. You're not seeking out something to fulfill you.
Right.
Everything fulfills you.
Right.
Everything is beautiful. So that's a quality of Rajas that I think maybe is not explored enough, that it's constantly seeking and looking for more, and then it feeds itself to keep going that way.
Right. It's like seeking outside of itself, whereas sattvic, it feels the harmony already within.
Yeah. And then salty is so interesting. Salt promotes digestion, so we definitely need it. And when we use it in moderation, it enhances the foods that we eat. So emotionally balanced, salty behavior can help you be more outspoken. You address your needs and desires. But if you have too much salt, it can lead to feelings of greediness and addiction, which I think of like try to eat just one French fry or one potato chip. Like that doesn't happen, right? It's like you can't just stop at one. So
very Moorish.
Yes. So salty personality traits, it can include feeling angry and grouchy and irritated. So if you find yourself craving salt, you should really take a clear look at your life and see where you're not expressing yourself. I find it's very much connected to the throat chakra, where we're not fully expressing ourselves, so we're eating it down. So I think people that have this high salty craving, they need to speak up more often and express their needs in a very balanced way. But when I look at it in connection to the throat chakra, that's also connected to listening, to hearing, and discernment. So within that like neediness, greediness, we need to create space so that we can listen more clearly and learn what's there for us and what's being spoken, and then speaking our truth. So that's how you can express your needs in a more balanced way, but also just express yourself, express your own emotions. Salty foods include seaweed, seafood, some meats, salt, and snacks. And you should definitely check labels of like frozen foods and canned foods because they can have a lot of salt in them.
Right. The processed foods as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Vata benefits the most from salt because it's the earth and water element. The earth and fire elements are in salt. Pitta and Kapha, which are hot and wet, respectively, they're aggravated by too much salt.
Okay. So excessive salt would stimulate more of the rajas.
Yes, Rajas and Tamas. Okay. Yeah, first you got the Rajas, and then you eat the whole bag of chips, and you're like,
greased out.
And then you're coughing on the couch.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, great. So that's sweet, sour, and salty.
Yeah, and then we get into the best tastes, the ones that are out there in nature that are made to clean us up. They're like the best, are pungent, bitter, and astringent. And we forget to put these in our diets, just adding like, oh my gosh, yesterday we make the best sweet potato kale khichdi as soon as it starts to get cold. I never make sweet potato khichdi in the summer or spring because it's too heavy. We do use the kale, but mixing kale and sweet potato together, the perfect balance in khichdi. And kale is a winter green. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, you've inspired me now. Of all those ingredients, I'm going to make that this weekend.
Oh, I love it. Just with a little bit of garlic, ginger, and I use a sweet onion. So it's very balancing in all the tastes. So pungent, let's talk about pungent. Pungent taste, it detoxifies, it stimulates digestion, it's heating and drying. So emotionally, when taken in small amounts, pungent food creates clarity, purpose, and motivation. Don't you love that?
Yes.
Clarity, purpose, and motivation.
That's
Who doesn't
great.
need that?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it cuts through like heaviness and fogginess, so that we can really see more clearly. So too much pungent, though, can promote abrasiveness, anger, and aggression. If you crave pungent foods, you might be looking for a way to express like pent up anger and frustration. So be careful not to like blow up from your pungent foods because it can create too much fire in you. So look for ways to cool down if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling angry, abrasive, and so on, you can look for ways to cool down by taking a walk or swimming. Taking a walk in the moonlight is very cooling. Drinking coconut water, as you mentioned. Examine areas in your life where you feel like you're really being walked over, and choose to sort of like move aside from those challenging things in your life and sort of just rise up with a sattvic quality to you. You don't need to engage in everything that comes your way. You can move aside. So I feel like having the right amount of pungent creates that clarity and that purpose and a knowingness that I don't need to engage in this. I can just step aside and let these things go on without me. And that's a good way. It's sort of like being very graceful, very sattvic in a situation.
Yes.
Foods that contain pungent. So what are they? So some of them are like ginger, hot peppers, tomato, salsa, clove. There's a lot of herbs that contain pungent: cloves, thyme, basil, cayenne pepper, and foods like radishes, mustard, wasabi, chili peppers, raw garlic, and onions. So you can see, like, if you just think about wasabi, just think about how clarifying that is. And you maybe take a little bit too much wasabi.
Right.
Whoa, but boy, does that blow it out, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's really foods that have a little kick to them. They're very, very like spicy, zesty foods.
Exactly. So kapha really should just like adore these pungent foods because it balances the wet, cold nature and can help them let go of extra weight. Pungent comprises, as we said, the elements of fire and air. So it needs to be a little bit limited for pitta, which is hot, and vata, which is dry. So it's the qualities of sattva and rajas, which is really interesting. Isn't that is an interesting thing to think about, how you have fire and air. I think that can help. I think sattvic, it can be too cold. It can be too ethereal. And so a little bit of fire helps to warm it up and make you more relatable, make you maybe even like more generous and warm and caring. What do you think?
Thinking with the nature of heat and dry, it can fan the flames pretty quickly, right? You think of that dryness, and think of relation of pitta is fire and water, so the fire doesn't go too much out of control, whereas this one, it can go out of control quite fast, which is what you were talking about a moment ago.
Absolutely. It's like sometimes, I don't know if this is the real way it works. And when I think of like pitta pushing vata, I imagine like in the pulses, like I see like a little fan, like a hand fan waving that flame and blowing it up and increasing vata, which sounds so counterintuitive, right? Like how can that happen? But that's how it happens.
Exactly. Yeah. You can really see how pungent taste. You have to be very careful with the amount you have and with balancing with other tastes in the diet, because it can get aggravated very fast.
Yeah, so just a little tiny bit,
right? Like I said,
just
not
a little
too much wasabi,
right? But you should have it because it's going to create those warming qualities. It's really fascinating when you talk about it. I love the connection to the gunas. Just love this.
Yeah, it is amazing. Another thing is making sure that your taste buds are not desensitized, which is why we cleanse regularly, right? After clients finish cleanses, they're like, oh my God, I can taste everything so much. Because over time, if you're using a lot of pungent spices or foods in your diet, you will become desensitized over time.
You just went more and more and more, right?
Right. And that can be harmful. Another reason why in Ayurveda we recommend cleansing regularly, so you can just reset the taste buds and really be feeling those flavors rather than having to use more and more of that taste.
Yeah, you really, Colette, you make me think of just like my dinacharya routine and how we begin our day with scraping our tongue.
Right.
And just looking at all that gunk that comes off and examining the tongue, but then doing all of our oral care, like oil pulling or gargling with sesame seed oil, brushing your teeth with a non-toxic toothpaste, like Crest and Colgate they're terrible. They have like preservatives and colors and dyes and weird stuff in them, but using a really good Ayurveda toothpaste. There's plenty good Ayurvedic or just neem powder or even baking soda on the market, and that will all help to stimulate your taste buds and clear that out. Totally. Yeah.
So we need to take care of our mouths and our taste buds. So, I mean, it's one of the pleasures in life is food and taste. So we want to make sure we're tasting correctly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. And then bitter. So bitter foods are really detoxifying extremely, and they reduce inflammation. They're just phenomenal if you're having any inflammatory response. They're drying and cold. So you think just like inflammation is hot and wet in most cases, right? And so bitter foods drying and cold, and they can have a lot of flavor. So small amounts of bitter, I see them as being able to clear the cobwebs away and allow us to see things more clearly. But too much bitter can create a sense of grief and disillusionment. So a bitter person can be jealous, jaded, and even mean. They hold grudges and they blame others when things go wrong. Sometimes when I have clients who feel bitter, like I mentioned, they're usually holding on to things. I mean, they're physically holding themselves in, but they're holding on to things that don't exist, that no longer exist. And they're wishing for a different outcome that's like never going to happen. I think we might all know that feeling. Yes. Right. So I find like the antidote is sort of visualizing the world as it is and situations exactly as they are, and just learning to accept them. And that can help alleviate those feelings of bitterness. Now, I know that sounds easier than it is, but if we really practice accepting situations, if we don't accept them, it's just going to create more harm in ourselves and our own bodies. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. So once we learn how to accept it, and I'm not saying just roll over and just like let things happen to you, I'm just being really conscious of it. This situation is not going to change. I need to make a better decision. And a little bit of bitter food can help clear the way, but not too much. So knowing that you're holding it in and that it's only damaging you, that is really key to understanding it though and letting it go. So try new things in life, collect new experiences, and let go of the past. I know it's something we say all the time, just let go of it, let go. I mean, but even though like sort of Vata ruminates over things and Pitta can get angry and frustrated over things, and Kapha just holds on to it forever as if it's part of them. But balancing that out with all 6 of these tastes, emotionally and physically, can really help us let go and move on. Absolutely. So foods that contain bitter taste are, they're like Swedish bitters, that herbal tonic that you can add to juice or water, as a bunch of leafy greens like sorrel and some yellow vegetables, bitter herbs like chamomile and dandelion and horseradish. Horseradish is a great one for bitter. So, and it's usually just a little bit can help you. But those leafy greens like arugula, even like charred mustard greens are amazing. So, and a lot of these are winter greens, so you can get them now. So bitter is really good for Kapha. Kapha has so much sweetness and kindness. They can use a little bit of bitter to balance those qualities. Like Kapha can sometimes just be so overly sweet. It's like, it's very cloying. It's too much, So just a little bit of bitter helps. So bitter is cool and light. And so the bitter taste can be balancing for Pitta. Vata should really avoid large quantities of bitter for those same reasons that they're already light and cool. So they want to avoid that. Light and cool will increase Vata. And so the gunas here would be very sattvic, but then too much would be rajas. Right. I mean, everything in moderation just will create like a fabulous person emotionally and physically. So,
and that's what it is. It's a having all these spices like Ayurveda recommends in moderation. Yeah,
and not avoiding anything.
And then the final taste we have to cover is astringent.
Astringent. So astringent again, they belong to the detox family. They have a wonderful way of cleansing the palate. So I think of that they're great for emotional clearing as well. So they sort of like clear the slate. Astringent foods create space to let you clear the mind. I sort of think of it as getting back to work without lingering too much on reminiscing or lingering emotions. So too much astringent, because it's really compacting. It's one of those foods that wrings out excess liquid in the system. It can lead to a loss of interest in activities and routines. But a small amount goes a really long way. So astringent foods aren't that common, but found in beans, lentils, pomegranates, which I had last night. Pomegranates, cranberries, unripened bananas, green bananas are very astringent. You can feel it on your tongue. Yes. Black tea, dark greens, spinach. You can feel that drying quality actually in your mouth when you eat these astringent foods. So people with astringent emotional qualities are often, they can be filled with bitterness as well. That sort of bitterness that we've talked about. They can look contracted, depleted, and dried out. These are the people, it's really hard for them to smile. So the remedy is to add qualities of sweet, sour, and salty in abundance into their lives. Guided meditation, sweet, floral, spicy essential oils. We haven't really touched on essential oils too much, but that can help balance all of these tastes. Getting out in the elements. I find astringent can be really balanced by walking in all sorts of weather, rain, cold, windy, early morning and evening sun can do wonders to balance astringent taste. I would say that Vata benefits mostly from sweet, sour, and salty, so they would avoid astringent. Pitta benefits from sweet, bitter, and astringent. So I think when you look at these astringent qualities, Pitta can be so outspoken and verbose and opinionated that a little bit of this contraction can help balance them. Kapha benefits from the pungent, bitter, and astringent, as we've said, because of how sweet they are. So those really cover every emotion I can think of. You know, when I really think about the emotions, I think there's really two main emotions, love and fear. And so we get filled, the sweet, sour, and salty fill the love, and the bitter, pungent, and astringent can create fear. But we need to have I don't want us to have fear, but I want us to have an awareness that there are a range of other feelings within us. So not everything can be all love, and not everything should be all fear. We need to just open our eyes and use all of our qualities, our sattva, our rajas, and our tamas. We need to use all of those qualities really to move through the world in a more balanced way. And then we feel better. And we relate better to people around us. And I think we're nicer people.
So true. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people get confused sometimes with the taste recommended for each dosha type, but essentially you're only restricting your taste if there's an aggravation or an imbalance. In general, you want the taste in moderation, right?
Absolutely. And so so I went through all the tastes and all the doshas and all the gunas, and then I want to say, you know what? Just eat seasonally.
There you go. Well, that's what I want to ask you about.
Right.
Some just general guidelines, because and that's what we've been trying to do in the podcast is simplify it, because we're getting, we're getting decision paralysis sometimes. So
right.
let's move on to that, Susan. What are some general guidelines you can give the listeners when choosing what to eat?
Yeah, so we want to be careful, because most of us live in areas where we have like supermarkets that have everything. Right. So like you have like mangoes in winter and watermelon in winter, and you have I don't know, the winter greens and so on in the summer. So it's really hard to make a decision when we go to the grocery store, because like we have this like vast supply chain from the whole world. Stuff coming from Brazil and Chile and California and things that are totally out of season for where you are. So we need to, if you have a farmer's market near you, that is a great way to go shopping. Right. because they're just going to have what's in season. So in December, there's not going to be fresh tomatoes, in most places, unless you're in Australia or something.
Yes.
But so we really want to know what's in season. So my new book, Seasonal Self-Care Rituals, coming out on December 29th. There are grocery lists. Thank you.
Great.
There are grocery lists for each season there, but also I took a lot of information from Dr. John Douillard, who wrote a book 20 years ago called The 3-Season Diet. Really, he was my champion for translating this information from India, which is not relevant to us in our seasons, because in India, it's from north and south, and their seasons are so different from our seasons. So he really did an amazing job in translating that information. And then I've added some newer foods to it, things that we have out now that we didn't used to have, and what to choose and avoid. So that is all in my book, but just think seasonally and think eating a wide variety of foods, which means all 6 tastes. If we don't eat a wide variety of foods, then our gut microbiome really suffers. We have discovered that the gut microbiome is seasonal. It needs to change. So, like cavemen might have eaten venison in the winter, but only shoots and leaves and grass in the summer, but they got what they needed from that food in order to thrive. So wherever you are, just think. Also, we look at the quality of opposites in Ayurveda, right? We look like if something is heavy, we want to do something light. If it's wet, we do dry. So when we think about the season, so here it's fall going into winter, so it's dry and cold. Let's just use those 2 qualities, right? So we want to do the complete opposite. We want to have warm and lubricating foods. Hence, sweet potato khichdi.
There you go. Perfect.
Exactly. More ghee. And so we just want to do the opposites. And don't fret, but just you can wake up every morning and see what the qualities are in you and what the qualities are outside of you. So we have the 5 Mahabhutas, right? The space, air, fire, water, and earth. Do I feel more earthy today? Do I feel more fiery today? Is it hot outside? Is it cold outside? And then do the opposite.
I love it. We have just been focusing on that, going beyond the doshas and focusing on the gunas, the qualities, and getting more information from your body, from your environment, what you need.
I love that. Everybody wants to know their dosha, right? Everybody wants to know their dosha.
We're just too caught up on the dosha now. I think it's great when you start the journey, but then as you move on, you need to just move beyond the doshas, and now let's get into the qualities. I mean, starting the journey with the doshas is perfect. It's a perfect package to grab the concept of Ayurveda.
Yeah. And then I'm like, forget it.
Exactly.
Let's do this.
There you go.
They all want to know. I'm so confused. I'm vata, but I'm having a pitta. And I'm like, just relax.
Yeah. And it's also labeling yourself, which I'm not really keen on either. When I do consultations, like, yes, it's your birth constitution, but don't worry about that. Let's look at what's going on right now with your gunas.
Exactly.
So thanks for those general guidelines. So I agree. Go to your farmer's market, see what's, in season, buying local, less of a carbon footprint. Also, what's in season is cheaper because it's abundant, and sticking with fresh food as much as possible. Avoid highly processed foods. And also, the last question I want to put to you before we finish up, Susan, is about cravings. So when we crave certain foods, I'm sure this is, of course, in line with the taste we were talking about. Can we discuss that a little bit? Should we listen to these cravings? How do we know if they are false cravings or good cravings?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to listen to our cravings. So again, if we are, all of it is listed in my book, in Amadeus' book. So if we're craving sweet, think about it. Think about that. Am I craving more love in my life? If you're craving bitterness, is it because you're not speaking out for yourself? Are you craving sourness because you're holding on to some vendetta or something like that? So we really definitely want to look at that craving and see, be more discerning. Is it an emotional craving or is it a physical craving?
That. Yeah, I like it. Like looking beyond just the physical aspect of it, and going more into the emotional aspect too. And this is the journey of Ayurveda. It's a self-study, and it takes time, especially for at the start of your journey. It takes time to peel back those later layers and get the clarity, but it does come in time as you go through your journey. You bring more harmony and balance to the gunas, to the qualities, the doshas, the mental gunas. So allow yourself the time, enjoy the self-study and have patience. But it's a wonderful journey, especially speaking to those people who are new at this journey. And, they may be listening going, I can't, decipher what I'm feeling, or I don't have that clarity to read the qualities of my body. It will come. You just need to start peeling back the layers, cleaning out the house, and along that journey, that clarity will come.
That is great advice. And to know that Ayurveda is really a living, breathing science of life. And you can sort of make it individualized in your life. You don't need to follow everything 100%. You don't even need to follow it 50%. Even 20% can get you moving in the right direction. So I always encourage people to be easy with themselves, to love themselves where they are and not where they're going to be. Just know that you're perfect right now and you've come to this at the right time.
That's a beautiful place to end, Susan. But before we do completely finish up, where can people find out more about you, Susan, and your offerings and your new book coming out in December?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So my website is Breathe Ayurveda, like breathe, BREATHE. And I'm sorry, the dogs now go crazy.
They say hello. That's okay. I'm glad they made an appearance.
Yeah. So, and also just Susan Weis-Bohlen Ayurveda. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can find me everywhere. The new book comes out from Simon & Schuster. It'll be available everywhere books are sold, and you can get it online as well. And I do consultations through Zoom or just through the phone or however people are comfortable with it. So breatheayurveda.com on my website. You can find all that information. But I think if you just Google Susan and Ayurveda, I come up pretty high.
Great. Susan Ayurveda. Perfect. And I will put all those links in the show notes as well. And just a reminder that the title of your book is Seasonal Self-Care Rituals, Eat, Breathe, Move, and Sleep Better According to Your Dosha.
Right.
Sounds wonderful. Congratulations again.
God, I loved being in conversation with you about all this. It was really wonderful.
It was a lovely chat, Susan, and thanks for taking the time today to chat with us.
Thank you, Colette.
Take good care of yourself.
You too, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Susan, and please check out the show notes for the link to Susan's website where you can find out all about her offerings. If you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them. And if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, please do so that the new episodes will automatically download for you. If you'd like to comment on this episode, please do so over on the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group, and I'll put that link in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take good care of yourself, be well, and slán go fóill. Bye for now.